those who ask for longer episodes, here's Season 1, Part 2, No Stops, All Story. Follow the year of 2010 alongside me on Mine, Missing, Murdered, Unidentified in New England. I couldn't find much information on Lance Chaylen Talbert other than he was 30 years old, shot repeatedly in the back in broad daylight at roughly 11:30 a.m. on July 28, 2010. Lance's demise came at the hands of an unknown shooter at Dayton and Clementine Park in Dorchester, Mass. He was pronounced deceased at the scene. Lance was found at Shawmut Tea Stop. If this Lance Chaylen Talbert is the same as Lance Talbert, also from Wendover Street, Dorchester, which I feel pretty confident in, then there is a criminal background that may have contributed to his murder. Lance Talbert was sentenced to 57 months for the shooting of Adelio De Rosa and conspiracy to commit murder of the Wendover Street Gang. He was convicted of RICO conspiracy count and Vicar murder conspiracy. These mean racketeering-influenced corruption organizations, like gangs, and Vicar is violent crime in the act of racketeering, also known as the killing of others in retaliation to gang violence. If this is the same Lance, there is definite gang activity involved. If you or anyone you know can help solve this broad daylight murder, please call 1-617-343-6470, 1-800-494-TIPS, or text TIP to crime. Anthony Smalls was a 40-year-old Dorchester, Massachusetts native. He was into music. He was a beloved dad of 9 children between the ages of 8 to 20, a devoted husband to wife Lilita for over a decade, with 3 of their 9 children together. Anthony Smalls was overall a wonderful person whose daughter Latifah said inspired kids to play sports. Anthony was also a DJ and a bartender at the Carver Den in Dorchester. Anthony's life came to a tragic end in the early morning hours of July 2nd, 2010. Cameras show Anthony walking home from a friend's house around 12:58 a.m. and being chased by 2 vehicles on foot. The vehicles are described as a dark-colored Dodge Durango SLT and a light-colored Honda Accord with a sunroof. The occupants of one or both vehicles proceeded to shoot Anthony multiple times outside of 4-6 Melton Ave in Mattapan, where his body lay on the sidewalk undiscovered until a body shop opened at 6 a.m. Authorities are unsure if this was a random killing or a targeted attack. Anthony was only a few blocks away from home when he was found. In the aftermath of Anthony's shooting death, there was a candlelight vigil from his Dorchester home to his death scene in Mattapan. Jessica, one of Anthony's daughters, walked in a Mother's Day Walk for Peace in 2016 in honor of her slain dad. Gun violence isn't new to Anthony's family, as his cousin, Kevin Smalls, was killed by gun violence in 1991 at the age of 21. Billboards, shirts, wristbands, magnets, and a $10,000 reward have yet to yield tips. It's been over 10 years. Someone has to know something. Be the voice of justice and call 1-617-343-6423. Our next case takes us to Hartford County, Connecticut, to July 7th, 2010, where the unidentified remains of a person were discovered. There is no mention on what remains were found or not, and there is no determinant of age, sex, height, or weight. If you have any information, please call 1-860-679-3980. Like many of these cases, I couldn't find any information on the life of 33-year-old Angel Robles Rivera, only a glimpse into the final moments of his life. On the evening of July 9th, 2010, at about 11:20 p.m., concerned neighbors phoned the police after hearing a fight coming from Angel's home at 275 Country Street in Fall River, Mass. 2 men fled the scene in either a gray, dark gray, or silver SUV. The first suspect is described as 24 to 28, now 34 to 38, with a medium build. The second assailant is described as less than 24 years old, now less than 34 years old, and about 150 pounds with dark hair. Police found Angel with a gunshot wound to the head. If you or someone you know can help, please call 1-508-324-2796 or 1-508-672-TIPS. We again know little publicly about 23-year-old Robert Fleming. Like many victims, there is little to no coverage of Robert's life or death. Robert was the dad of a 3-year-old, now 15-year-old son. He was also known to police for unknown reasons, though it is known that Robert had gang affiliations. Just before 11 p.m. on July 20th, 2010, Robert Fleming's world stopped. While standing on the corners of Adams and Robertson Streets in Dorchester, Mass., with a young woman, two men approached, one pulling out a handgun and shooting Robert point-blank in the chest. Both of these cowardly men ran to a parked car and drove away. As Robert lay mortally wounded, blood draining into the hot summer sidewalk sun, he called for the comfort of his mom with his dying breaths. This was all recounted from a witness across the street. Robert was taken to Boston Medical Center where he was pronounced dead. Please call 1-617-343-4470 or 1-800-494-TIPS. On July 25th, 2010, a busy summer night in Roxbury, Mass., between 9:30 and 10 o'clock p.m. on MLK Boulevard, Kenny Rackley was shot in the back in front of a park packed with 150 to 200 people. And of those, only one brave person came forward as a witness to the crime. No arrests have been made. Kenny's grandma, Faye Rackley, wants people to come forward and ensure another person doesn't suffer from another death like she has. Faye is also part of Just in Time to bring together trauma survivors to inspire healing and processing grief. In one source, there is a lovely picture of a memorial to Kenny. Please speak up and call 1-800-494-TIPS or text TIPS to crime. We start August with 30-year-old, fashion-forward, basketball-loving, wonderful dad of 4, Timmy Knighton, who became another victim to gun violence on August 6th, 2010. Just before midnight, Timmy was sitting in his car between 86 and 92 Oak Street in Springfield, Mass., when a gunman shot 20-plus shots into Timmy's torso, shots caught by the police shot spotter, a device utilized to detect gunfire and triangulate where it occurred. Timmy was chilling with friends in his car right before the murderer struck. Although there were several people present at the time of Timmy's senseless slaying, they didn't cooperate at all with police, and police did not disclose possible motives. EMTs were sent to the wrong location, leading to Timmy succumbing to his injuries. No arrests have been made. Since Timmy's death, his ex-wife Jennifer raised all 4 of Timmy's children, and his daughter Selena won an ultimate prom contest in 2014, discussing the importance of finishing school. Selena received a tuxedo and shoe rental, flowers, hairstyling and makeup, and a double-decker bus ride. After all Selena had been through, and staying in school and working towards goals, she definitely deserved a cool experience like that. She was going to be an EMT, she was going to be a heart surgeon, because nobody helped her father, says Jennifer Brown, Zayaja's mother. Timothy Knighton's daughter, Zayaja Knighton, is an EMT, an emergency room patient care technician, a member of the Massachusetts Air National Guard, a full-time medical science pre-med student, and a trained ballet dancer who appeared on So You Think You Can Dance. Zayaja earned positive reviews from the show's judges. Zayaja also plays volleyball. Zayaja made it through 4 months' worth of auditions before her time on the show came to an end. If you know who killed her father, Timothy Knighton, please call 1-800-494-TIPS. 18-year-old Amos Brown Jr., known as Famous Amos to friends, was ambushed in a calculated broad daylight gun attack on Friday, August 13th, 2010 at 1:52 p.m. This ambush happened on Lexington Ave in Norwalk, Connecticut, near El Coquille Grocery. Amos survived the gunshot wounds, only to be taken off of life support at Newark Hospital 2 days later and dying that Sunday evening. Before I go into detail about Amos's death, it is imperative to discuss his history that likely contributed to his daylight murder. In 2009, Amos was acquitted for murdering 16-year-old Tyquan Hunt during a 2008 melee that resulted in multiple stabbings. Tyquan's killing was part of a 75 to 100 juvenile melee that began at a Landon Street party. Amos stabbed Tyquan in the heart after Tyquan pointed a gun in his face. Amos said he felt his life was in danger. Tyquan had shot one person and had a loaded .38 that was found in his pants. These kids knew each other. Amos and Tyquan, they played football together as younger children. They were childhood friends. I say kids because these are still children, young, dumb, and full of a lifetime of struggles that led them down the wrong pathways. You see, Tyquan was part of the Money Green mob, a claim his mother denies. A mob who got their start in the Meadow Gardens housing complex of Meadow Street. Between the slaying of Tyquan and Amos's confession, which he turned himself into provide once a warrant was issued for his arrest, threats were made against him, his family, and shots were fired at his home. These threats led Amos's dad, a well-liked man in the community, to seek help from police. Amos Sr. also talked to numerous participants of the melee, convincing some to testify on Amos's behalf at trial. After Amos was acquitted of Tyquan's death, he and his father went to Georgia, but returned December before his death to Connecticut after not finding work. This after Amos's dad refused to let Amos leave the house for safety reasons. Now that we have the backstory, we jump forward to August 13th, 2010, to Amos's gang retaliation ambush and calculated slaying. Amos was driving in his black Honda at roughly 1:50 p.m. when a gold car and a 2010 Chevy Malibu, stolen from Enterprise Rent-A-Car on Main Street in Norwalk, with two passengers, began shooting at Amos's car at the corner of Lexington and Orleans Streets, which happens to be the intersection where Tyquan Hunt's friends hang around. The two cars stopped 100 feet up the road from where the shooting started. The gunman exited the vehicle and shot at Amos, who was coming in the opposite direction. A tall, skinny black male, wearing a long red t-shirt with lettering on it and shorts, got out of the gold car, firing their pistol at Amos's car in the silver Volvo up the road driven by Joseph Bateman, Amos's cousin. He called for help, who tried to move his car around Amos to give him a chance to escape, but Amos never got the chance to escape. Joseph got out of his car and returned fire. Amos's Honda rolled backwards, crashing into the side of El Coquille Grocery. Amos had been shot in the back of the head at some point during the chaotic scene. The man in red walked down a nearby driveway, but was unable to find an escape route. He then took off his red shirt and proceeded to stroll away in a white shirt. Joseph allegedly knew who the gunmen were, but refused to cooperate with authorities. Amos's funeral was August 23, 2010. The suspects are three black males who were teenagers or in their early 20s, now early 30s. This tale of death, retaliation, and more death doesn't end with Amos's death. More lives have been taken, and more families changed forever due to this ongoing feud. Police know who is involved in all of this, but witnesses are unwilling to cooperate. Tit-for-tat retaliatory killings between neighborhood gangs tied to this one incident spanned over 3 years and destroyed countless lives in the process. Joseph Bateman, Amos's cousin, was himself gunned down on February 3, 2012, and was once shot through the cheek in a 2011 attempted carjacking, where two men in black approached his car trying to steal it, but Joseph fought off the would-be carjackers, with his girlfriend in the car, who was too startled to drive afterwards. According to their accounts, the police doubted their story as there wasn't evidence supporting this. Joseph's killer was found 5 years later. His name was Hakeem Atkinson, just 22 when tried and convicted, and 17 at the time he gunned down Joseph. Another shooting victim was Amos's girlfriend, who was shot in the left hamstring while inside her own home. The victim of a drive-by shooting when 5 people were inside the house and 5 shots fired as a deadly warning with no other injuries, making me think that maybe she also knew who killed Amos and was being threatened into silence. There was a lot of gun violence and retaliation tied to Amos. Most shooting victims in 2011 had ties to Amos's death in some way. Amos's cousin, a 19-year-old girl, was hunted by a car full of men in Norwalk, Connecticut, and escaped with a gunshot wound to the hand. Another cousin of Amos's was Michael Mizzy Robinson, who was shot while walking near South Main Street and Grove Street in Connecticut. Mizzy had a 3-year-old daughter and was playing with her and his girlfriend just days before his untimely death. Mizzy's killer was 25 at the time and 30 at the time of his arrest. His name is Ibo Boone. There were also multiple drive-by shootings committed towards homes not tied to Amos, as well as dwellings of people tied to this were targeted instead of their current inaccurate addresses. Another series of deaths involved Kyle Freitag, who gunned down members of Meadow Gardens gang thought to be responsible for Amos's death. Kyle murdered Dejon Johnson and seriously wounded another young man. He received 30 years for his crime, a sentence that Amos's dad was saddened at the length of, believing Kyle should have received leniency. At one point, Kyle was shot in the neck while wearing a shirt with Amos and Joseph on it. Kyle was a known gang member who testified in Amos's murder trial and became a target for the Meadow Gardens gang. Kyle felt threatened because Dejon and other young men were riding near Kyle's work and he feared retaliation, so he claimed to have killed before he was killed himself. Now that we have discussed death upon death and violence galore, there are also peaceful events tied to Amos. On August 21st, 2010, there was a March for Peace and March to End Gun Violence, where a small group of citizens marched to bring attention to gun violence and the impacts on youth in the community. On the 4th anniversary of Amos's murder, Chinese lanterns were released in remembrance. Amos's dad is anti-gang and anti-gun violence, and he speaks at conferences and is assisting in revising gun control legislation. Please call 1-800-494-TIPS. Amos Sr. sat down for an interview for News 12 Brooklyn in August of 2022, 12 years after his son was murdered. Amos Sr. was the senior VP for the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, for 3 terms. He was my strength and my weakness. Amos Brown Sr. is still seeking justice for Amos Brown Jr., his son who was gunned down on August 13, 2010, and who was taken off of life support 2 days later. According to Amos Sr., I had to play a part in his death. I had to turn off the switch. Amos Jr.'s murder was a retaliation killing, and the Money Green Gang, they was determined to murder my son, said Amos's dad. Police have information on who was there and who was involved, but the people themselves remain silent. I did everything I know how to do to get justice for my son, as much as putting my life on the line. Amos Sr. warned his son that these people were out for him, and since they, quote, couldn't beat him with fists, they ambushed him. Amos Sr. tried to get the Money Green Gang to leave his son alone, but to no avail. There was a hit list of people that the Money Green Gang had it out for. 2 of the people on the list were actually murdered. When in Georgia, Amos Jr. thought it looked as though they were running, and cowardice were for running, and leaving the 4 remaining people on the hit list behind. Though Amos Sr. knew nobody was there to help those boys, he had to say what he could to calm his son down. When things didn't work out in Georgia, the pair came back, and that's when the Money Green Gang ambushed Amos Jr., killing him. Amos Sr. created a large banner chronicling the children the Money Green Gang had murdered and called them out for their heinous and cowardly actions. The gang did not respond. Amos Sr. thought that if they had shown their faces, he would have. He would have been outnumbered himself and murdered, yet he was still willing to make that sacrifice of no return. When asked in the interview who killed his son, Amos Sr. said that a lot of names flashed around, but he didn't know the trigger puller yet, and that everyone in the crime scene on the day of Amos's murder was guilty and should have been stopped in 2003. After calling out the Money Green gang, Amos Sr. says there haven't been any more murders at their hands. Amos Sr. says the police know who the murderers are and that the community knows who committed the murders, but are too afraid to come forward. Amos Sr. says that they can come forward anonymously. There is a $50,000 reward for Amos Jr.'s murderers' arrest and conviction. Amos Sr. has faith that the murderer of his son will be brought to justice. If you or someone you know killed Amos Brown Jr. on August 13, 2010, please call the Norwalk Police Department Investigative Service Bureau at 1-203-854-3111 or Detective Chris Imparato at 1-203-854-3190 or by submitting a tip at norwalkpd.com or by texting the word Norwalk PD, all one word, into the text field, followed by the message, and sending it to 847-411. David Santos Martins was a 30-year-old man born, raised, and killed in Dorchester, Mass. At 9:30 p.m. on August 12, 2010, at 531 Adams Street, across from the Hemingway Park, 2 people were shot. David suffered a life-ending wound and was declared deceased at Boston Medical Center, and the other person, an unnamed teen, was shot multiple times and survived their injuries. There is no description of the suspect, and possible motive for the shooting has never been released. A memorial scholarship was created through the David Martins Peace Foundation and awarded to a worthy winner. Please call 1-800-494-TIPS. We stay in Dorchester, where 39-year-old Terrence Small was found across from 2 Shaftard Street on August 17, 2010. Terrence had been shot multiple times and was discovered laying on the ground and pronounced deceased at Boston Medical Center. Please call 1-617-343-4470 or 1-800-494-TIPS. 26-year-old Jamil Harmon had a signature laugh, one that others still fondly recall. Though Jamil was senselessly slain on August 18, 2010, he enjoyed time with his son Trayshawn Boyd and Sakara Boyd, his wife and Trayshawn's mom. Jamil was stabbed at 12:30 p.m. at 600 block of Blue Hill Avenue between Seaver Street and Columbia Road in the Roxbury area of Boston. What is infuriating about this case is that, like others, there were witnesses around, people to help, to call for police, to see who committed this heinous stabbing. Yet nobody spoke up. It is shameful. It is sad. A human being was attacked in broad daylight and taken to Boston Medical Center via Boston EMS, where he was pronounced dead. And as an even sadder aftermath, Trayshawn Harmon himself, Jamil's young son, was gunned down by 18-year-old Devontae Walker just before 8:30 p.m. on January 11, 2020, just blocks away from where his dad was stabbed almost a decade earlier. Trayshawn graduated the English High School in Jamaica Plain and was taking engineering classes at a local community college and working alongside his mom Sakara at the Sweet Green restaurant prior to his murder. Please call 1-800-494-TIPS. James Therian was a 52-year-old white male with hazel eyes, brown hair, and a goatee when he disappeared on August 25, 2010, the evening after a daytime fight with his sister Monica, whom he lived with on Thompson Street in Sanford, Maine. James would be 64 now if still alive. James was 5'6", 205 pounds, and at about 7:30 that night he disappeared. As Monica, his sister, was watching television, she heard James say, "Oh well," and then he left the shared apartment wearing a dark blue long-sleeved jersey and leisure pants. Monica felt responsible for James's disappearance, saying that she wishes she had called him, or looked where he went. James took his wallet, left behind his keys, medications, and glasses. When he didn't immediately return, Monica thought James had gone to a meeting. It wasn't specified what kind of meeting, though AA and NA are often to be found at this time of night. James has not been formally identified since. Monica waited up until midnight that night, then 2 a.m., and reported James missing at 3 a.m. It was uncharacteristic of James to leave without warning, as he was a reported homebody. This, according to Monica, who disputed couch surfing rumors about James. Among other troubles, James has chronic pain from gout, and due to this, he has trouble walking. James also has arthritis and was dependent on pain medications when he disappeared. All of his 11 medications were left behind. There have been potential sightings of James since he left the apartment. An acquaintance claims they saw James on 8/29/2010 in the Sanford area. There was also a reported sighting of James in the Portland, Maine area around a similar date. There have been no clear indications or whereabouts since August 2010. There is no evidence of foul play, but due to James's health, there are concerns for his well-being. Sanford police can't really investigate a missing adult unless there is some indication of foul play, since adults are free to leave as they wish. Police also pointed out they didn't know the relationship that Monica and James really had. Monica passed away in 2014 without knowing what happened to her brother, though he was listed as surviving her in her obituary. Please call 1-207-324-9170 with any information. We return now to Seaver Street in Roxbury, Mass. 396 Seaver Street to be exact, where 45-year-old Hayden Stephen, a Brooklyn, New York native, was gunned down at 4 a.m. Saturday, August 28, 2010. Hayden was taken and pronounced dead at Boston Medical Center. There is no known motive and no suspects. Please call 1-617-343-4470, 1-800-494-TIPS, or text TIP to crime with any information. Anthony Mark Green was a 38-year-old we all wished we had as a coworker. Anthony was overall a good person. Anthony, lovingly referred to as Ant or Ag, was a dad attending a party tied to the Caribbean festival that was occurring in the Roxbury-Dorchester area. Someone shot Anthony several times at 61 Stratton Street in Dorchester, Mass. at 5:55 a.m. August 28, 2010. Although there were witnesses, they were not cooperative with police, and Anthony was brought to Boston Medical Center where he was later pronounced dead. If you were there that day, please speak up. A decade has passed. Kids grew up without their dad. Be brave and call 1-617-343-4470, 1-800-494-TIPS, or text TIP to crime. On August 13, 2010, a skull without hair was discovered by The Generation, a commercial fishing vessel, at about 11:25 a.m. The calvarium was recovered during a tow 50 to 60 nautical miles east-southeast of Cape May in Bristol County, Mass. The skull belongs to an unidentified female between the ages of 31 to 70 years old. No other information is available. Please call 1-617-267-6767. Besher J. Johnson Thompson was only 23 when he was shot to death. At 9:45 p.m. August 28, 2010, an unknown assailant shot Besher at 970 Blue Hill Ave in Dorchester, Mass., which is right by the Franklin Park. Besher was transported to Boston Medical Center where he was pronounced dead. Please call 1-617-343-4470 or 1-800-494-TIPS. Several shots were fired towards Eric R. Smith Johnson, killing him, at 471 Blue Hill Ave, Dorchester, Mass. on September 2, 2010. Please call 1-800-494-8477 with any information. Trigger warning: domestic violence. There is a trigger warning of domestic violence in this case, as well as resources. Please call 1-800-799-7233 if you or someone you know is suffering from domestic violence. Jefferson, Maine is quiet with one landmark, the Damariscotta Lake State Park, and is the location of one of Maine's few technically unsolved murders. Before he became a victim, Charles E. Woodburn was born December 4th, 1951 in Newburyport, Mass., and was a child and woman abuser. Gross side fact: Charles had twin brother sex offenders in Bangor, Maine. Court documents and family members say that Charles was an abusive man. Charles had a string of illegal marriages and illegitimate children. Gina, a daughter of Charles, said that he had a habit of creating children and not staying in their lives and not paying child support. Diane Woodward was Charles's wife at the time of his disappearance. Charles's stepfather, Reginald, said that Charles mentally abused Diane and left her on 2 separate occasions. One stepson, Brian, recalls taking beatings in the place of his mother, Diane. Brian said Charles was abusive to the children and Diane, and when Charles attacked Diane, Brian called Charles an expletive, and Charles would redirect his anger. Diane was a witness, victim, and participant in domestic violence. Diane later went on to abuse and terrorize her new husband, Robert. Court documents say that Diane had contact with Charles as late as May 2003. Diane was granted a divorce in 2004 based on grounds of cruel and abusive treatment and abandonment. I don't know when Robert and Diane became involved, but it did begin sweetly. Robert and Diane fell in love at a yard sale. Domestic violence marred this wholesome beginning. Robert and Diane also had multiple domestic disputes. One time, Diane ripped the cords from the wall so Robert was unable to call 911. Diane was arrested and later returned home, where she threatened suicide and homicide at the same time towards her husband, Robert. Despite this, Robert claimed they had a good relationship. After Diane's death, Robert drank and took too many anxiety meds together, once trying to die by police-involved shooting in order to join Diane. Robert was unsuccessful in his attempts and temporarily ended up in a psychiatric unit. Diane went by a variety of last names, including Darling, Woodburn, and Gaudette. Diane had a spare trailer made into a shrine to her late daughter, who was killed in a car accident in 1995. Amidst their search, police found more than just a body at the Gaudette residence. A small trailer was located on the property, and its contents were perplexing. The space housed what appeared to be the belongings of a young girl. A room was set up just as a proper bedroom would appear, with the bed, clothes, and dolls all perfectly in place. But this trailer was not connected to the home in any way, and it did not have basic amenities like heat or running water. It would be revealed that Diane had lost a daughter in a tragic automobile accident in 1995, and the space had been transformed into an eerie sanctuary of sorts, in which Diane's love for her late daughter and her own fractured state of mind had converged. Diane suffered great loss, as well as domestic abuse at the hands of Charles Woodburn. Robert didn't speak up about his concerns until after Diane's death on August 17, 2010, due to a heart condition and emphysema, as he sympathized with Diane's domestic abuse predicament. Charles Woodburn was reported missing on September 2, 2010. The family were relatively reclusive, which is how Charles went so long without being reported missing. Charles kept to himself too, working a trade where people come and go all the time without notice. Diane told a story about Charles taking a large sum of money and fleeing, which would be great and all, except there were numerous debt collectors searching for Charles, and Charles left behind his wallet and vehicle. Diane also claimed that Charles left her for another woman and would not be coming back. Diane's children believed her. Charles owned the property he was later found buried on. It went to Diane after the divorce was settled in 2004, and then to Robert when Diane passed away in 2010. They got out of liens via deed transfer. Information about remains on Charles's former property, located at 219 Neck Road in Jefferson, was relayed to police in 2010. In 2012, there was a state police interview. In February or March 2014, permission was granted to search the property, and on August 3, 2014, Charles's remains were finally recovered by cadaver dogs and police, buried in the yard of Charles and Diane's former home. 1 hour after searches with the dogs began, the scent of human remains was struck by a good doggo doing its job. A backhoe was brought in, and next to a set of concrete steps by Charles's woodworking shop, buried 2 feet underground, were the remains of Charles Woodburn. They were located after nearly 12 years missing. He had never left home. He was 2 feet below the surface. And there were rumors about who killed Charles. However, no arrests were made. Sources say that Diane had Charles dig his own grave, using a drawer as a ruse, and then shot him in the back of the head and covered the hole. Police will not confirm this theory, although they are aware of it. According to sources, Diane used to brag about killing Charles and burying him in the front yard. Charles Darling, Brian's brother, claims that Robert said he saw Charles's death. Robert claims that he never said Diane was Charles's killer and that Brian only made that claim because he was upset over an inheritance dispute. Regardless, they both think that Diane killed Charles. Robert claims he didn't suspect Diane for a while until red flags became overwhelming. Quote, "You're married to someone for 17 years and he ends up buried it out in the front lawn. It's pretty clear she did it," said Robert. Solving this case is extremely hard, as the crime took place over a decade before his body was found, and now that finding is nearing another 8 years ago. Most people believe that Diane murdered Charles. Regardless, Charles is dead. Please call 1-207-624-7143 or 1-207-287-4691. And as a side note, the relationships demonstrated in this were unhealthy and codependent, and seriously, you shouldn't have to live in a situation where those things happen. If you or someone you know needs help, please call 1-800-799-7233. You deserve to be safe, happy, and loved. Robert Schultz, a Shapely, Maine resident, grew up lobster fishing in Rye Harbor, New Hampshire, and was the star basketball player in his high school. And while his family owned Schultz Meat Products Company, a natural casing hot dogs production factory, Robert wanted to work with his hands, so he traveled fixing sea equipment across the globe. He also bred racehorses and had his children homeschooled. Robert was lost at sea on September 3, 2010. It was a steamy summer sunny day in the middle of a heat wave right before Hurricane Earl made an appearance in New England, when Robert went out to sea on his boat, the Cat's Meow. Robert told friends that he was going to go spearfish diving and rod fishing for stripers and bluefish. The United States Coast Guard found the Cat's Meow at about 2 p.m. anchored and empty, except for several personal belongings left behind, including keys, a license, fishing gear, life jackets, wetsuits, flares, and other distress signals. The Cat's Meow was found at Kitts Rock in Portsmouth Harbor near Whaleback Light, where distress signals were left undisturbed. A computer simulation performed very early in the search using Robert's biological features determined that Robert likely drowned and was lost at sea. Despite this grim likelihood, there was a 29-hour search conducted with 14 helicopters and airplanes. Search teams focused on tidal areas and around the harbor entrance and the shoreline between Kittery and York, Maine, but with no luck. Heavy fog made the search for Robert difficult. There were dangerous riptides on this sunny day due to Hurricane Earl, and it is thought that they may have played a role in Robert's demise. Robert was 64, now would be 74, white, 6'5" to 6'6", 210 to 220 pounds, with brown hair, brown eyes, and a scar on his hip from a prior surgery. If you have any information, please call Maine Marine Patrol at 1-207-633-9595. Jeremy Price was an 18-year-old mentally disabled child with a criminal past and, according to his family, was confused and often acted out. In 2007, at just 15 years old, Jeremy was pressured into punching a random person for entertainment. This man, 41-year-old Michael Hansberry, fell into a coma after hitting his head on the curb and later died as a result of his injuries. Jeremy was charged with manslaughter, though was found to be incompetent to stand trial. Jeremy was remanded to the Department of Children and Families until he was 18 years old in August of 2010, and afterwards sent back to his family for care. While in the custody of the Department of Children and Families, Jeremy jumped out of a moving vehicle and escaped. This was not his first escape attempt, though. Jeremy scaled a 15-foot fence in May 2010 to escape police custody while awaiting trial/competency hearing results. And on the night of his murder, September 6, 2010, Jeremy was an escaped mental health facility patient. Someone shot Jeremy in the chest at 60 Astoria Street in Mattapan, Mass. at 8:30 p.m., and Jeremy was pronounced dead at Boston Medical Center. The murderer escaped on a black Suzuki headed towards Norfolk. There was a second unidentified victim who suffered from non-life-threatening injuries. Please call 1-617-343-4700 with any tips. 18-year-old Hassani Andre was shot in the head at 11:15 p.m. Tuesday, September 7th, 2010, at 9 Tonawanda Street in Dorchester. No other information is available. Please call 1-800-494-TIPS or 1-617-343-4470 with any information. 21-year-old Curtis Jarvis was one of 9 children. Curtis came to Boston for a family reunion in August of 2010 and was a Virgin Island native who wanted to earn a trucking license in the U.S. so he could be a truck driver with his dad, who owns a trucking company on St. Thomas. According to one source, Curtis went for a ride to drop his sister off at work, and then the guy he was riding with went to visit another friend, and suddenly, someone started shooting. This happened after Curtis's sister requested he go home and not to the next destination. Curtis responded with a laugh and said it would be okay. Curtis and a second unidentified victim were shot in a gun battle at 7:32 p.m. on Wednesday, September 15th, 2010. This bloodshed occurred at 27 Cameron Street in Dorchester, Mass. Curtis is buried in St. Thomas. Police say that there was a lack of cooperation from witnesses. Please call 1-800-494-TIPS or 1-617-343-4470. Tiffany Sherelle Vaughn is a 47-year-old, 5'9" to 5'10", 150 to 175 pound black woman with brown hair and brown eyes. Tiffany was last seen in New Haven, Connecticut on September 20th, 2010, at the age of 35. Tiffany may have left the state on her own accord. However, no other information is available. If you are Tiffany Sherelle Vaughn or know the whereabouts of Tiffany Sherelle Vaughn, please call 1-203-946-6316. The partial skeletal remains of a male between the ages of 26 to 77 of an undetermined race were discovered in Westport, Mass. On October 6, 2010. The torso, one or more limbs, and one or more hands were not recovered. While searching for clams at the Back Eddy restaurant, boat slips at 1 Bridgeport Road, Westport, Mass. In 8 to 10 feet of water, underneath a vacant boat slip, a quahogger discovered the partial remains. The remains were pulled from the river bottom and thought to be 6 months deceased, give or take, which leads to a death somewhere in April 2010. Web Sleuths has submitted Gerald P. Shaw Jr., featured in Episode 4, as a potential match. No exclusions have been made. Please call 1-617-267-6767. Updates October 2010. Ken Pava and Michael Sylvia reported the following. On October 6, 2010, a man was quahogging near a vacant boat slip behind the Back Eddy restaurant in Westport, Mass. As he quahogged in this area, the man recovered what appeared to be a human skull from the water, which was approximately 8 to 10 feet deep. The man wrapped the skull in plastic and brought it to the Westport Police Station. The Massachusetts State Police Underwater Recovery Team responded and searched the area where the skull was found, but no other evidence or skeletal remains were recovered. The following day, the skull was transported to the medical examiner's office for further examination. The medical examiner confirmed that it was a human skull, and a further examination by a forensic anthropologist suggested that the skull most likely belonged to a Caucasian male whose age would have ranged from approximately 30 to 70 years, and whose death was at a minimum 6 months prior to the discovery, but could have occurred years before then. Further investigation revealed that there have been 3 men who have died or lost in boating mishaps near the entrance to Westport Harbor during the 1970s. Although portions of 2 of these men were later recovered, their skulls were not. The human skull recovered in this case was subsequently sent for DNA testing. Although a DNA profile was successfully extracted, it was insufficient to upload to CODIS. Testing is underway using a DNA sample that was provided by a family member to assist in making identification of this individual. If that testing is not successful, this case will be further reviewed for forensic genetic genealogical testing. Frederick Freddie Mathiasen is memorialized in the Garden of Peace, a place that serves as a memorial to victims of homicide, a place where families, friends, and the larger community may remember and honor the lives of those taken by violence and serve as a visual testament of the need to eliminate it. At the same time, the garden serves as a symbol of hope, peace, and renewal. Freddie was 35, a father of 2, and studying HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, at Kaplan, also referred to as a refrigeration student, and trying to improve his life and the lives of those he loved. Freddie lived part-time at Cathedral Project Authority and lived part-time with his girlfriend. This same girlfriend wished she could have told Freddie she loved him. Freddie performed music under the name Freddie Flacco and dreamed of buying his mom a home out of the projects, which is a noble dream given his family didn't have enough money to bury Freddie. Someone shot Freddie 4 times in the chest at A2 Harrison Archway at Cathedral Housing Authority project. Different accounts state that Freddie was going to the studio like an any ordinary day, while other reports state that Freddie wasn't normally in that area. However, he was there to meet his daughter after school. Freddie formerly worked for Comcast as a technician. Freddie's mom, Anne, heard shots at 11:40 a.m. and called his sister, Danny, at 1:40 p.m. to tell her the news. The local police department was nearby, heard the shots, and were there in seconds. Police determined that Freddie was not robbed. Please call 1-617-343-4250. Trigger warning: domestic violence. There is a trigger warning of domestic violence in this case, as well as resources. Please call 1-800-799-7233 if you or someone you know is suffering from domestic violence. Lynn Melk Brennan was 53, funny, loving, and caring. She was the mother of 3 sons, ages 27, 24, and 22, and was a teen model for American Girls in the mid-1970s. Lynn was going through a divorce at the time of her murder from her husband of 30 years, John D. Brennan. Lynn received help from the Domestic and Sexual Advocate Centers, Bridges, in Nashua, New Hampshire, who can be reached at 1-603-889-0858 if you need their help. Lynn had only lived in her apartment at 267 North River Road, Manchester, New Hampshire, for a few months prior to her death, and had resided in Hudson, New Hampshire for years before then. Lynn was last seen in public at Bunny's Superette at 75 Webster Street at about 3:29 p.m. on October 4th, 2010. Lynn was murdered sometime before October 10th, 2010. A friend called the police for a welfare check as nobody had heard from Lynn in 1 week. Lynn's body was discovered on October 11th, 2010, and decomposition had begun. According to sources, Lynn wasn't the type to put herself in any danger, and there were no signs of forced entry. Someone made a tip about a white car with New York plates, and it is unsaid if this tip led anywhere or if it was even investigated by the Cold Case Squad. Please call 1-603-668-8711 with any information. Tahisha Milton was a 39-year-old mom of 4 from Roxbury, Mass., a 1989 graduate of Cathedral High School, and was scheduled to receive her BA in Human Services from Springfield College. Tahisha was a doting mom who had recently thrown her daughter a Sweet 16 party. Tahisha was a youth leader in church as well as an activist in her community. One of Tahisha's last conversations was 2 hours before she was killed, when her son told her that he was going to get a haircut, that he loved her, and he would see her later. Later that day at 3 p.m., Tahisha was an innocent bystander at Quick Stop, a convenience store located at 337 Warren Street, Roxbury, Mass., less than a mile away from her residence, when either an SKS or AK-47 was used to shoot at least 2 people, killing Tahisha. The clerk was shot and ran out to call 911. According to one source, a preliminary investigation discovered this was not a random shooting. Tahisha was not the target, though, and robbery was not the motive. It was the owner of Quick Stop named Sanusi Mo Kaba that was thought to be the target. After Tahisha's senseless killing, there were 100 plus people at a candlelight vigil held in her honor. There was also a citywide debate sparked about the length of time memorials should be kept up because of the length of time Tahisha's street-side memorial was kept up. Please call 1-617-343-4270 if you have any information. Nothing is publicly known about Jermaine Barry, a 30-year-old dad of 2 sons. Jermaine's young life included a criminal history of a 1997 assault and battery of an officer, a 2003 assault and battery, and a 2006 carrying a firearm without a license. Jermaine was shot in the throat and killed at the intersection of 481 Geneva Street and Waldock Street in Dorchester, Mass. At 8 p.m. on October 26, 2010, and was taken to Boston Medical Center. Jermaine's mother, Ethel Barry, ID'd Jermaine's body after cops came to her door. Police left Crime Stoppers pamphlets under the wipers of neighbors. Please call Dorchester PD at 1-617-343-4300. Ricardo, Ricky, Adam Encarnacion Sr. was 28, a fun dude to be around, a good guy, really funny, and chill. Ricky also had a criminal record which consisted of domestic assault, motor vehicle violations, and drug arrests. Ricky is survived by 2 children, 2 brothers, a mom, grandparents, and cousins. Ricky was a prominent part of the Latin Kings, a violent and deadly gang known throughout most of the U.S. There was a power struggle in the Latin Kings, alleged grudge over a bad drug deal or as retaliation from a house party with rival gang members. There was an argument 3 months earlier at the same intersection where Ricky would later be shot, where the cops got involved and the men had to be separated. Ricky got arrested that day because he tried to go after the men again. Ricky was born in Rio Piedras, Puerto Rico, and shot and killed in a drive-by shooting while relaxing on the porch of 325 North Front Street in New Bedford, Mass. Ricky was shot several times at 4:30 a.m. near Tallman Street. Evelyn Diaz called 911 when she heard the gunshots. Evelyn described Ricky as a son to her. Ricky now resides forever in Oak Grove Cemetery. Over 150 Latin King gang members came to pay respects, made a truce with police, and the police closed off the area to allow the Latin Kings to pay their respects as long as no trouble broke out. As far as I'm aware, everyone kept their word. We know nothing of Ricky's time with the Latin Kings, only who he was to his family and friends. Regardless of his gang affiliation, he deserves justice, just as those who are victims of the Latin Kings. What witnesses there were uncorroborative. If you or anyone you know has any information leading to the whereabouts of Ricky's murderer, please call 1-800-494-TIPS. Orvin Blanding was 40 years old when he was shot and killed at 1150 Harrison Ave in Roxbury, Mass. At 12:30 a.m. on Halloween 2010. Orvin was transported to Boston Medical Center where he was pronounced deceased. Please call 1-617-343-4470 or 1-800-494-TIPS. We stay in Roxbury, Mass. On Halloween 2010. It was mid-morning at 9:40 a.m. where Richard Brown, a 41-year-old Boston native, was gunned down by multiple bullets at 60 Catawba Street in Roxbury, Mass. If you have any information, please call 1-617-343-4470 or 1-800-494-TIPS. Trigger warning, animal death. Mom, I love you and I miss you so much. Anytime anything was wrong, I could tell you, even if it was me doing something stupid. The first couple of weeks, I would still call, just hoping that you would answer, and it would all be a bad dream. I still want to call you all the time. I loved what we had in Guilford. Living right around the corner was perfect. Even my nightly appearances on the four-wheeler. You always had bologna in the fridge, and even cookie dough most of the time. You were the best mother anyone could ask for. You were amazing to me and my friends. People would meet you once and tell me, "Oh, I love your mom. She's such a sweetheart." I hope both you and Sport are in a much better place. I love you, Mom. Rip. This is the message left to Bobby Miller from her son Johnny in her online obituary memoriam. Bobby Miller was born in Manchester on September 25th, 1956. Bobby had 2 children with her ex-husband, Gary Miller, a well-known New Hampshire automotive dealer. They had 1 son who lives in the Lakes region and 1 daughter who works for NASA and lives in California. Bobby enjoyed hiking, crafting, making stained glass, and being a mom. The weekend of her murder, Bobby was making window boxes. Bobby was a 20-year-old former Wolfboro, New Hampshire resident and moved to Guilford, New Hampshire roughly 2 months before her murder, where she lived alone with her dog Sport, a yellow lab mix. According to sources, Bobby filed for divorce on September 19, 2007, citing irreconcilable differences, and the divorce was tumultuous and nasty, protracted and acrimonious, all due to Gary's business and personal holdings. And divorce matters were not totally settled. There were legal changes regarding 2 pieces of real estate property just weeks prior to Bobby's murder. One piece of property that was still in debate was the cabin she formerly co-owned with Gary in Acton, Maine, that Gary received in the divorce settlement that burned to the ground the Friday before Bobby's murder. There were sandy-colored flames in the Acton, Maine house fire, and the fire was discovered to be arson. Gary Miller was at the Acton, Maine home earlier in the day the fire broke out, but was not there when the actual fire broke out. Nobody was charged with the arson in the Acton, Maine house fire. One source claims Gary sold all of his dealerships and resources to cover restitution and alimony for Bobby. There was more to Bobby Miller than her multi-million-dollar divorce proceedings with Gary, though, including a large family featuring 1 brother, 4 sisters, nieces, nephews, uncles, aunts, etc. Bobby was also busy going back to school for business and starting her life over after the divorce. Though things were beginning to go well, when asked, the attorney who closed on Bobby's house said she thought that Bobby had reason to be afraid. Another friend said, "And I looked at the TV and I saw woman in Guilford shot, and I knew it was Bobby. That was it." Bobby's family believes that she was targeted. No restraining orders for Bobby or Gary were found to be between the 2 of them. However, there was a restraining order on Gary from his son Johnny for unknown reasons that expired in 2008. Bobby was senselessly murdered at her recently purchased home of 123 Country Club Drive, Guilford, New Hampshire. Bobby's murder likely happened on Halloween 2010, though she could have been killed as late as 4 to 5 p.m. November 1st, 2010, 1 to 2 hours before her son Johnny discovered her at 6 p.m. There is a 25-hour window of death. Bobby's death certificate says she died within seconds of a shotgun blast to the head and neck, with perforations to her skull, brain, carotid artery, and lungs. Sport was also shot several times to death. There were no signs of forced entry, and no weapon was located. Since there was no sign of forced entry, could it be possible that Bobby's murderer used a Halloween disguise as a ruse to gain entry? Or could it be more nefarious? Could it be someone that Bobby knew? According to online sources, alternate theories to the husband did it are that a disgruntled former employee of one of the sold dealerships decided to exact revenge, or Bobby knew the arsonist of the Acton, Maine fire and was killed for her silence. It remains unknown, though, if Bobby knew her killer. There are a plethora of theories and no answers. This is a struggle that Bobby's family and police have been dealing with, and Bobby's family has gone to bat on the state level to try to get more attorneys for the New Hampshire Cold Case Squad in hopes of speeding along the process of the unsolved cases in New Hampshire. Bobby's ashes were scattered atop Mount Major. If you have any information, please call 1-603-223-4381, 1-603-223-3860, or 1-603-223-8573. Soane Rankin was only 21 years old when, shortly after 6 p.m. on November 3, 2010, at Commercial Plaza at State and Mapledell Street across from American International College in Springfield, Mass., someone mercilessly stabbed Soane to death. No other information is available. Please call 1-413-787-6355. Just knowing that their murders are still unsolved, that someone's still out there that could still be murdering, I feel that it's not fair that somebody's just still out there, and then you have 2 sons in the grave, and you don't have no closure, no answers, no nothing. You almost feel like nobody cares. These are the words of a heartbroken mother named Mahogany Payne, whose son Lloyd was 18 when someone shot him in the heart. On November 4th, 2010, at 1:18 p.m., Dorchester PD responded to shots fired at 34 Malin Road. At the time of the shooting, Lloyd was driving his new green Acura sedan when at least 1 shot was fired. His car then rolled into the fenced-in parking area of Bullard Street, which was literally his family's backyard. Lloyd didn't have a criminal record and no ties to local gangs. His murder seems to be a random shooting. And unfortunately, this isn't the first murder to occur in the family. Lloyd's older brother, Rashad Payne, was shot and killed in 2009, and his homicide also remains unsolved. If you have any information about either of these murders, please call 1-617-343-4470 or 1-800-494-TIPS. Trigger warning: suicide. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is a United States-based suicide prevention network of over 160 crisis centers that provides 24/7 service via a toll-free hotline with the number 988. It is available to anyone in suicidal crisis or emotional distress. J.L. Hildebrand was a woman from the Passamaquoddy tribe who studied cosmetology at Mr. Bernard's School for Hair Fashion. J.L. dyed her hair black and had hazel eyes and enjoyed dressing up with contact lenses. For unknown reasons, J.L. jumped from the Joshua Chamberlain Bridge, which connects Bangor to Brewer, into the Penobscot River below, just before midnight to her likely demise on November 5, 2010, in front of law enforcement. J.L. didn't resurface, and no search attempts recovered her. Her remains have yet to be recovered. J.L.'s last Facebook post was the night she jumped. It said, "Cunts," and that was posted at 11:31. It is also said that she texted her sister prior to jumping as well. J.L. was 5 feet 10 inches tall, and when J.L.'s remains are recovered, will be male, though J.L. lived her life as a woman. J.L. was 22 with her whole life ahead of her, though she struggled with past suicide attempts, past suicidal ideations, and a struggle with alcohol abuse on her social media postings. J.L.'s criminal record from when she was 18 or 19 was for theft, criminal trespassing, minor possessing liquor, disorderly conduct, theft by misauthorized use of property, and violating conditions of release. J.L. left her purse with personal belongings on the bridge. Though a good swimmer, J.L. may have been intoxicated when she went in, at a time when hypothermia sets fast, within minutes. J.L.'s mom, Nikki Hildebrand, thought J.L. was running from police and drinking and fell by accident, and J.L.'s brother brought up the prior attempts to the media. J.L. was declared legally dead in 2014. Her case stays open until she is brought home. J.L. deserves to be brought home. If you know of this area near Joshua Chamberlain Bridge, please, if safety allows, check it and see if you can help bring J.L. home. Please call 1-207-947-7382. Nervin Charlot was 19 and Emmanuel Louison was 17. They were of Haitian descent, and that is what we publicly know about these boys prior to their deaths. Their murders. The same incident, the same manner of killing, and the same site of discovery tie these boys together forever. 64 Mascot Street in Dorchester, Mass. Is the location where Emmanuel's body was discovered at 1 a.m. on Sunday, November 7th, 2010, suffering from a gunshot wound to the chest. Emmanuel was taken to BMC and pronounced dead. Nervin was discovered laying face down in the overgrown dirt driveway of 63 Mascot Street, which was an unoccupied home foreclosed on in 2007 after the previous owner died in a car accident. That house became the hangout spot for teens to drink in the yard. Nervin was found wearing a red cap, gray jacket, and jeans at 11 a.m. on November 9th, 2010, less than 100 feet from where Emmanuel Louison died. Some reports claim it was a neighbor who discovered Nervin. Others claim it was a workman painting an adjacent building. Regardless, there was a large police presence and Nervin remained undiscovered for what different reports say is nearly 48 to 60 hours after his death. Neighbors saw 3 to 4 young men running across the street at the time of the shooting. Nervin was missing since Saturday night, reported missing Monday, and his family was told to check at BMC. They were informed Tuesday that Nervin was the person found dead that morning. There was no blood evidence at the scene or on Nervin's body. Please call 1-617-343-4470. 35-year-old Ernest Likely was found with multiple gunshot wounds at 27 Fessenden Street, Mattapan, Mass. At 12:30 a.m. Thursday, November 11th, 2010. Ernest was rushed to Boston Medical Center and pronounced dead. No other information is available. Please call 1-617-343-4470. Thomas Enquist Sr. had a lengthy criminal record, including attempted murder in the early 1990s when he was in his late teens to early 20s. Thomas was incarcerated for a short amount of time. Thomas was also linked to the Lynn Breakers, a burglary ring, who, though suspected, were never convicted in the theft of $2.5 million worth of jewelry. This heist included 27 New York Giants Super Bowl rings from a warehouse in Attleboro, Mass. The Lynn Breakers wore ninja outfits, carried walkie-talkies, a cell phone jammer, power tools, and went in through the roof. In May 2008, Thomas was arrested for assaulting a teenage boy and his mother in front of their home. Thomas was quoted as saying, quote, "If I ever see your asses out and about, I am gonna get you. Stay away from my kid or I'm gonna kick your ass." Thomas was asked to leave the property and punched the teen 3 times in the face. The teen's mother jumped in between the two, and then Thomas punched the teen around the mom. That was in his past, though. Thomas enjoyed weightlifting, professional recreational painting, and making wood furniture. Thomas taught his son, Thomas Enquist Jr., the trades: how to do construction, how to put up a wall the correct way, how to ride a dirt bike, and they built things together. Thomas was a caring person who changed his life around after much time, according to his son. Thomas was caring and would do anything for anybody. A neighbor fondly recalled how Thomas would plow her driveway in the wintertime when he saw her shoveling. She said of Thomas that he's basically a good guy. He just had a rough life. The past is the past. People change, and Thomas Enquist Jr. said that his father changed. Thomas was a former Lynn, Mass. Resident and Londonderry, New Hampshire resident at the time of his murder. Thomas was found riddled with bullets at 10:38 p.m. Tuesday, November 23, 2010, after a call for an abandoned vehicle was made to New Hampshire State Police. Thomas was found shot to death in his black Ford F-1150 pickup truck with license plate NH2274142. His vehicle was located in the right breakdown lanes between exit 1 and 2 on Route 101 West in Auburn, New Hampshire. Thomas's family was shocked and sad at the news and said that he had no enemies. Thomas was last seen that Tuesday afternoon. Thomas Enquist Jr. also had a troubled past and a criminal record at a young age and a tragic ending. Thomas Enquist Jr. died of an OD on October 17, 2012, almost 2 years after his father was murdered. He had been released from jail just days earlier. If you are living with addiction, please contact SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration Helpline, at 1-800-662-4357. And if you have any information on the murder of Thomas Enquist Sr., please call 1-603-271-3636. Jerome Lassiter, aka Butta, was 26, outgoing, flashy, protective of his 2 younger sets of twin siblings, including Georgina and Georgette Brewington, and lived in Dorchester, Mass. Georgina admits her brother wasn't perfect and that he did not deserve to die the way he did. They left him in the back of his car, with his feet out of the car. They shot him in the head, in his back. That's evil. It was 7:30 a.m. when Jerome was discovered riddled with bullets in the back seat of his car at 3536 Rose Street, Roslindale, Mass. On December 3, 2010. Jerome's slaying occurred earlier in the morning after he was lured to the secluded area and targeted. The imperfections that Georgina references are Jerome's criminal background at the young age of 18 for intent to distribute a Class B substance, and at 20 pleading guilty to federal charges of conspiracy to distribute cocaine. Also at age 20 for selling crack cocaine in a school zone. When his son was born, though, Jerome changed his life around to be the dad his son deserved. At the time of his murder, Jerome worked at Prime Honda in West Roxbury and was supporting his 2 boys. Jerome had 2 sons. One son is now 18. He was 6. His other child, now 12, only 7 months old when Jerome was gunned down. Police think that Jerome's death was drug-related. However, others think that this is inaccurate. Jerome's sons, like their aunts and dad before them, grew up without a dad due to violence. Jerome's dad was stabbed in the 1980s, which is also an unsolved case. Please call 1-617-343-5826 with any information. Donald D. Sampson is a 42-year-old, 6'1", 165 to 175 pound black male with a great smile, black hair, and brown eyes. Donald was last seen rocking bushy eyebrows, a mustache, had a larger than normal nose due to previous trauma, and, quote, longer than normal fingernails. Whatever that means. Donald has a linear scar on his chest and a tattoo on his chest and forearm. It is not mentioned in any sources what kind. D was bald when he disappeared when he was 31, after he went missing either December 10th or December 12th, 2010, from the 200 block North Main Street near Oak in Randolph, Mass. D recently had surgery, was on medication, and it was cold outside. Veda, D's sister, got a call from D. She was unable to answer as she was picking her daughter up from the airport, so it went to voicemail. Unsure what that voicemail said. When Veda called back, D didn't answer. According to family, D didn't travel. He liked to hang with his mom, his sister, and son. Few details of his disappearance are available. D was a father who got his child ready for school in the mornings. He was described as fun, smart, always there for people, a good dad, and a homebody. D has a previous criminal history. Nothing was kept hidden from his family. Veda reported D missing and, quote, I think if they would have jumped on this at the time I went and reported, we might have had some answers by now, she said. I think because he was an African-American adult with some history of trouble that they let it slip under the rug and they refused to help me. According to one source, we've had cases where families will provide a picture of their missing loved one, and police have decided to use a mugshot from that person's past that has nothing to do with the fact that they're missing. There are conflicting reports of what police think happened to D. Some say that police told Veda that D was on the run and not missing. Others say police don't think that D's criminal past has anything to do with his disappearance. Police re-interviewed people who knew Dee, and cadaver dogs have been utilized and have searched various areas of interest. Veda said that they, the police, couldn't see beyond his skin color, as they initially told her to hire a private investigator, a service Veda is unable to afford. A quote from Veda that I 100% agree with is, "Just because you have a criminal record doesn't mean your life is worthless." Please call 1-781-963-1212 or 1-413-776-1364. We end the year of 2010 with 2 unidentified skulls that were discovered in a cardboard box in the basement of a Huntington Avenue, Boston, Massachusetts apartment building on December 15th, 2010. One skull belonged to a 17 to 25-year-old white female, and the other belonged to a 30 to 50-year-old white male. These skulls may be medical or educational specimens. However, due to there not being supporting documentation to this theory, they are being treated as forensically significant until their origins are discovered. No physical descriptions are available. The estimated post-mortem interval is roughly 10 years. This means that the skulls are from persons dead roughly 10 years, so their deaths could be around the year 2000. There is one exclusion, and that is for the female skull. Patricia Krieger from Washington State is excluded from being the owner of the skull. If you have any information, please call 1-817-718-7904. This has been Season 1 of Mine. Thank you for all of your love, support, and consideration for listening to this podcast. I hope you have a fantastic day. Please join me next time on the next episode of Mine, Missing, Murdered, Unidentified in New England.